there are some things that I want you as a new player to see from the very beginning where you might be starting out on a free trial. The first thing we're going to do is go to the menu, right? We're going to check out some of our options. One of the first options I like to use is going to my audio and turning off the music. The music's good. If you like the music, you're playing by yourself, turn it on later. For purposes of this video, I'm not going to have music from WoW playing in the background. Um, I'm going to also limit certain other outputs like pet sounds, emote sounds. What those two are is like whenever somebody cheers, they type /cheer and you'll hear them go, yay, or something like that, right? It's annoying sometimes, but it adds to the whole vibe of the game. Not necessary. Pet sounds. If a hunter is running around with his tiger and they're sitting there chilling, the tiger will lay down and yawn, and you'll hear him. Roar. It's cool, but again, you're gonna hear it a billion frickin' times. It's one of those things that it's cool at first, but get rid of it, right? The other thing we're gonna get rid of is error speech. If you're clicking a button over and over and over again, like say fireball or something like that, you cast the fireball, you've got 1 to 1.5 seconds before you can cast that fireball again. But you want to make sure you want to get that next fireball off as fast as possible. So you're clicking that button like crazy. And every time you click that button and that spell's not ready, it's going to let you know. It's going to say, that spell is not ready yet. Let's get rid of that. We're going to get rid of the error speech. Now, one that I do like having on is the dialogue. So that whenever you go up to like a quest character or something like that, you talk to him and he's going to say something like, hi, how are you doing? Or something like that. Or, hi, adventurer, I have something to say to you. That can add some pretty good ambiance to the game. I like leaving it on, but I am going to go ahead and turn it off just for this series. Ambient sounds. I don't know if you can hear it right now, but you can kind of hear like birds chirping, stuff like that. Now they're gone. I like having them. They're cool to have. You'll hear horses clopping around. It is a little more immersive without being overwhelming. Now, with that being said, you can go up here and you can turn it down real high. Now we can really hear those birds chirping and stuff. Or we can turn it down to where we can just barely hear it. It's more of a background thing, right? Okay, well, we'll just keep it around mid to mid high level. All right. Dialogue. Dialogue can be a little loud sometimes. So that's another one. We'll just kind of turn it down a little bit. Right. So this handles audio for the most part. Okay. Audio channels, distance filtering, audio cache size, none of that really matters. Sound and background, you definitely want to turn off. Because say you need to go look something up on Wowhead, one of the websites that you can find tons of information on. Well, you need to alt tab out of the game. Well, if you've got this turned on while you're trying to look at Wowhead, you're still going to be hearing all of the sounds from the game. Now, that could be good if you're on a PvP server or something, and all of a sudden you're getting attacked and you can hear the sounds of you being attacked. You can tab back in real fast and hopefully kill that hunter that's trying to gank you or the rogue that snuck up on you. But if you're not really worried about that thing, I definitely suggest turning off sound in the background. Okay, enable reverb. Um, it's it's not something that really changes a whole lot. Like right here, the tooltip says this will affect performance. It really doesn't. I leave it on because it does make things sound a little more natural. It's going to be things like when you're in a cave, the sounds kind of echo. And it really does help with the atmosphere. So I definitely leave that one on. All right, so languages, we're going with English. Network, we're not worried about network. We are going to optimize the network for speed because we want to lag as little as possible. We don't want to worry about IPv6 because it can lead to certain issues with certain things. And we are going to turn on advanced combat logging. Now, this isn't something that we have to really worry about as new players, but it is something that comes into play once we get into the higher levels of endgame. When you hit level 80, or if you're watching this video at a later time, you're hitting 85, 90, whatever the level cap might be at the time, you're going to want to be able to log certain things to be able to say, go to a website, upload that log, and be able to view how well you were doing within that raid or dungeon or whatever. And you can't do that unless you've got advanced combat logging on. So it's one of those things. Let's just go ahead and turn it on. The next thing we'll take a look at graphics. I am playing on a laptop, doing all of this from here. I've got my secondary monitor set up so I can watch chat, things like that. But realistically, I've got a pretty good laptop. Um, there are some things we can put to ultra high, some things we can put to ultra low, things to help balance things out. Really, if you're getting 60 frames a second or more, you're doing great. If you're getting less than 60 frames a second, you might want to come in here, check some stuff out, right? Let's see if there's any of these that I think require any major attention. Um, Shadow quality, ultra high. We really don't need ultra high for shadows. Shadows are one of those things that it's kind of a subliminal thing. We're going to turn it down to high. Liquid detail, we want that on high. Liquid detail, for one thing, looks really good. It also helps for things like when you're fishing and stuff. Okay. Particle density controls the number of particles used in effects caused by spells, fires, etc. Decrease to improve performance. Now, the increase to your performance really isn't all that much, but what it does is it can lower how dense fire is. So if somebody blows something up with a bomb, like an NPC goblin throws a bomb and it explodes, it's going to be a big explosion, but it's also going to be dense. You're really not going to be able to see through it very well because of how many particles there are in that spell. There are other ways that this is affects other things, but I like to keep this one unfair. I want it in there. I want to have some particle density. I want to actually be able to see what's going on, but I don't want it to take away from the game. Uh, we don't need to worry about this one. It has to do with the advanced lighting and the rendering quality of the advanced lighting. We can turn it down, especially if you're on a lower spec system. Lighting effects, it's going to be more like your ray tracing. We're not using ray tracing, but it's the same idea where all has to do with lighting. You'd be amazed by how much lighting can really make everything pop. Now, that is something that can affect your performance, which is why I'm going to put it on high, but I'm not going to take it any lower. Depth effects controls the rendering of depth-based particle effects. Decreasing this may improve performance. I'm actually not sure what this one is. No particle depth fading or refraction. Traditional sun shafts and glares. Low is particle depth fading and no refraction. Depth-based sun shafts and glare. Okay, good. Particle depth fading and low resolution refraction. Oh, okay. So it sounds like what this has to do is like reflections and stuff. Again, it's one of those lighting things. I would keep this one on high. Uh, Compute effects. Um, this is another one of those that is debatable. I would keep this on good. Remember, you're wanting to keep a really good balance between being able to see as much as possible, get m- as good of an immersive feeling as you can without destroying your system. I am running on a 3050 Ti, pretty good graphics card, but not the best. Uh, you know, I'm not willing to fork out 3,500 bucks for a 5090. The 3050 Ti was at a price point that I found was doing pretty good. That's why I went with this one. So some of these I am going to turn down. Outline mode controls whether the selection outline effect is allowed. See the interface display panel for more options. We're actually going to put this on high, and I will explain that one to you later. Now, texture resolution. Texture resolution, we want that one on high. We want good textures. Spell density. Dynamic sounds like it's the one you want because, as it says, it reduces non essential spells shown based on your frame rate. If you're above your desired frame rate, everything will be shown. It sucks. It does not work the way that it says. Okay? So what happens is you're in a raid, you got 30 freaking people spamming all kinds of spells. Spells are going off everywhere, and your frame rate is jumping all over the place because you've got dynamic on, and every time your frame rates drop to low, it'll stop giving you all the effects. So your frame rates jump back up. So it goes, oh, you've got good frame rates now. So it start showing you all the effects again. So you've got this yo-yo effect, and it sucks. Personally, I put it on half. You know, I put it on half so that I can actually see some of that stuff. Some of that stuff is pretty cool. I like being able to see it. If it becomes too much for you, put it on essential only, and it only shows essential spells. Your spells are always shown, but the essential spells that you need to be aware of, things like what the boss is going to do to you, that's what it's going to show you. Like I said, I like keeping mine on half or most, right? Okay. Projected textures. Enables the projecting of textures to the environment. Disabling this may improve performance. We want projected textures. It has to do with how we see things that are in the distance and how well they look. Okay. View distance all the way up. We want to be able to see as far as possible, right? That's what that is. Controls how far you can see. Larger view distances require more memory and a faster processor. When I was playing back in 2006, 2007, I was running on a shitty computer and I had to have this thing turned down all the way. And I could get targeted by people in a Rossi Basin and shot at by people I couldn't see. Right? This to me is one of the more important things you need to have on there. Environment, I'm sorry, view distance. Now, environment detail controls how far you can see objects. Okay, so say there's a fire in the distance, like a campfire. This is one of those things that's more about ambiance than anything. As you're walking forward, you're going to be able to see things at max viewing distance, like the mountains, the trees, the solid objects. Sometimes there are things like campfires or say a building or something like that that you can't see until you get close enough to see it, and it's really weird looking when you don't have the both of these set to the same level. So if you do need to turn down your viewing distance, you can leave this higher, but don't leave it lower. That makes things weird. And I'm just saying that visually. It makes things weird. Now, ground clutter is something that friends of mine and I have debated about. Some of my friends having ground clutter turned up all the way. And if you're reading it, it says it controls the density and distance at which ground clutter items like grass and foliage are placed, decreased to improve performance. Myself, I turn it down all the way. It's not that it increases your performance so much, but there's really no reason for me to be walking along a random hill on the brand new Blood Elf that I made in the very first newbie zone, and it looks like I'm walking through a wheat field because there's so much grass waving around everywhere. You know, ground clutter is the stuff on the ground. Now, it's really not necessary. I have never had an instance where I've looked at a scene and the first thing I noticed was, oh man, they've got some really good ground clutter going on there. I turn that one all the way down. All right. Some of these advanced ones, um, ray trace shadows. Okay, so ray tracing has to do mostly with your RTX processors. I turn mine off. Ray tracing can really, really hurt your frames. Unless you have a really good graphics processor, I do not suggest using ray tracing at all. Even then, you can be going from 160 to 200 frames per second, turn on ray tracing, and suddenly you're getting 30 frames a second. It can be that drastic. Now, I'm not talking so much in World of Warcraft, more talking in other games, but World of Warcraft is one of those that, when you turn on ray tracing, you're definitely going to see a decrease in your performance. Let's see. Texture filtering, resample quality, BRS mode, graphics API. As you can see, I'm using DirectX 12. I am running on Windows. Damn sure don't want to use 11. And auto detect is just going to put it on 12. Physics interaction. I don't remember what this one is. I'm not sure what this one is. Um, I'm gonna leave that one just normal. Um, I think it has to do with like body movement, things like that. Usually physics is going to be like ragdoll effects. Like if you fall off a cliff or you crash your car and get thrown through the windshield, how much do you ragdoll and how well does it animate the ragdoll effect? That's usually what physics type stuff is. So like I said, I'm going to leave that one at player and NPC. My graphics card, it's auto detecting because I want it to use my RTX 3050. I do not want it using my freaking Iris graphics card. Auto detect is going to most likely put it on NVIDIA, but I'm going to force it. Max foreground FPS. We don't want it to be a max. Okay, we don't we don't want it to stop at 120. If it can give us 240 frames a second, let's go for it. Okay. Now, the max background frames per second, we want to. Okay, so this can cause issues with some computers. I've seen it happen before, not very often, but if you're not matching your normal frames, if you limit the frames that it does in the background, when you come back to the game, you can get some jitter, you can get some stutter. So I do tend to turn that one off completely. But what it means is that your graphics processor is doing all the work of creating all the frames, of rendering everything for the game. And when you alt tab out, it's going to keep doing that, right? It's still handling what's happening in the game, even if you aren't actually looking at it at the time. Now, what max background FPS does is it makes it so that it lowers the maximum frames that it will render while it's in the background. But then, like I said, you go back to the game and it goes from it was maximum of 30 frames per second to now all of a sudden you're getting your 120 and it can cause some issues. I've actually had it cause it to freeze up on me, and I have to alt tab back out, alt tab back in, and stuff like that. So I tend to just turn that one off. Now, target frames per second, you can leave it on. It does affect certain things, kind of like that thing we were talking about earlier when we were talking about dynamic spell effects. Um, 60 frames per second is your target. You don't want to be any lower than 60 frames per second. There are going to be times where you dip. Even with really good processors, there are certain zones that are just full of people, full of all kinds of crap, doing all kinds of things, and you're flying so you can see all of it, and your frame rate is just going to drop. And you were doing great. You're getting 80, 90 frames per second. All of a sudden, you're getting 30 frames a second. You're like, why? Bunch of shit's going on. That's all it is. Target frames per second, 60 FPS. Let's stick with that. Um, Resample sharpness, contrast, brightness, gamma. These are things that have to do with color. We're not going to worry about that. Compatibility settings, these are also going to be things that you'll have to decide on your own whether or not they are things you need to worry about. Okay? Keep in mind, you can screw all of this up, mess everything up, and come back up here and just hit defaults, and it's just going to take you right back to where you were from the very beginning. Now that we're done with that, we're going to apply and exit. It's probably going to have to reset some of my settings. Okay, there we go.